Okay, here we go with our third set of notes on ecology. This one being one on community interactions. So talk about how different organisms interact with each other within a community. So this is a slide we ended with last time, so nothing new on this, but I just wanted to draw attention here. We said in the food web before that interactions that could be included would be predation, competition, and then parasitism. So those are the three different interactions that we're going to be talking about today. The first one, predation, obviously this is probably the most familiar to us, but the thing that's going to be talking about next we're going to be interactions and how they're utilized by both predators and prey. They can both be used. So for example, predation involves speed or agility. In this case, you can use speed to capture prey, but also you need to be fast to escape prey, or escape becoming prey. Camouflage, obviously we probably think of this mostly from the role of the prey to avoid being eaten, but as in addition to that, predators could use that as well to become like ambush predators, just to hide and jump out and grab something if it comes close to you. And then toxicity would be something we probably often think of, well, I guess maybe this could go both ways, right? Something to subdue prey, so if you're something like this guy over here, but then also if you're going to be looking to get rid of predators and keep those at bay, you might be thinking about using toxicity as well. So again, all the different things we're talking about: speed to get away from predators or to catch prey, agility, good way to get away from prey, camouflage, these guys are very, very good at camouflage. These guys hiding to stay away from predators. So you got a moth right here, kind of tough to see, or predators such as this cuttlefish, just kind of hiding out here in the rocks, and then obviously toxicity. A little bit more on toxicity, so this is still kind of continuing along the same number one, predation. Bright colors usually mean toxicity. So if you think of the frogs we have in my room, they're pretty brightly colored. They're certainly not as brightly colored as these guys, but bright things are often toxic because they're sort of advertising the fact that, hey, come on, I dare you to eat me, or helping you easily recognize that this guy is a toxic critter. We already talked a little bit about mimicry, so toxic or non-toxic organisms could mimic a toxic organism. And then also plants use toxicity to help avoid becoming forage for other critters. So we call these, in this case, secondary compounds. These are toxins produced by plants to stop herbivores. Often they're poisonous, but they could also just be irritating or bad tasting. So think of like poison oak. It's pretty irritating. But then, kind of interestingly, a lot of our medicines come from the secondary compounds that are produced by plants. So if you think of aspirin, comes from actually the bark of the willow tree, or morphine coming from the poppy plant. Those guys are both plant derived. In fact, a lot of our medicines are sort of synthetic versions of chemicals that are found in nature. The second interaction is very common in ecosystems is competition. So competition being when two or more species need the same resource, or there's some sort of niche overlap, right? They're both trying to do the same job or eat the same food. And so when something like this happens, when competition happens, there's three possible results. One could just be the death of one species. That's probably what you most often think about. Right? One species just goes to, we say, local extinction. It kind of dies out in that area. Another thing could be you decide to share the resource. Or third, one species could evolve a new niche. A pretty famous example of this going on are these birds here. Like all three of them are eating in the same tree, and instead of one of them just dying out or evolving a niche to go to a different tree, they share the resource. So this guy here mostly eats in this area, this guy hangs out in the middle of the tree, this guy hangs out at the top of the tree, and so they divide that resource. They figured out how to share pretty well. And then the final interactions that we're going to talk about are symbioses, types of interactions, close interactions between two or more species. The first one, probably the most common, or the most familiar to, would be parasitism. So when a parasite lives off the host, oftentimes it harms the host, for example, a tapeworm. But at the same time, they don't necessarily want to kill the host because sometimes it's kind of hard for them to get into the host, and once they're inside a host, they're pretty happy there. So especially something like a tapeworm rarely kills its host because it's got a nice place to live. It wants to keep getting food. However, there are some parasites that For example, like the sea lamprey just kind of latches onto other fish and sucks their blood. For them, it's so easy to latch onto another fish, they don't really care if they harm the host. Or something like a tick, which could, singly doesn't really do a whole lot to an animal if it latches onto it, but sometimes you see pictures of like moose in Alaska or whatever that just have millions of ticks on them. In that case, they can do harm. Another type of symbiosis would be called mutualism. Something of mutual, like mutual respect, respecting each other. Mutualism is cooperation, where both species benefit. So a really good example of this guy would be the cleaning wrasse. That's how you pronounce that. This guy right here is a cleaning wrasse. This guy will go up to things that could normally just chomp down on it very, very easily, like that moray eel. They're pretty vicious predators. This guy just eats parasites or chunks of food stuck in that guy's teeth, and he gets a free meal, and the moray eel gets parasites taken out of his mouth or gets a cleaning. So they both get something good from the relationship. And then the final type of interaction or symbiosis that we're going to talk about is commensalism. This is where one species benefits and the other isn't really affected all that much. So the primary example of this would be this guy here, the cowbird. He just sort of hitches a ride on top of that cow, and as that cow walks through the grass, it might stir up insects, and he can jump off the back and grab some insects, get some food, get a free ride. But you're talking about a very, very lightweight bird riding on the back of the cow. It's not really doing anything to the cow. It's not a whole lot of trouble for him to carry that bird around, so he's not being affected, positive or negative. This guy's getting a ride and getting some food, so he's definitely getting some positive effects. So with that, that is the end of the community interactions.